All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Semo?
Well, today we are continuing our path down the ideological route and rigid thinking. Uh, but we're using Wheel. This is Wheel of Time episode, and we're kind of bringing it home with fictional characters. And today's subject is, according to the internet and the audiobooks, Egeanin. But I always pronounce it Egeanin, and you always pronounced it what?
Eganin. I
Egeanin.
put the emphasis on the A or the E, the A, and it's supposed to be on the second syllable, the second vowel, the anin. So Egeanin. So I eventually got used to saying Fail, so maybe I can get used to saying Egeanin,
Okay,
but it'll
so
take a
for those
minute.
that don't know the minor characters as well, and maybe you just did a once through on it, she is the Shanshan ship captain that captures Bail Dolman in the second book, but then ends up being basically blacklisted would be the right word, maybe from her own culture, uh,
Well,
because
no, because they don't.
oh
So
no
no,
no no she after Falm fell,
mhm,
she found two Soldam who were spoiler alert if you haven't read the books, who were
yes.
they were the ones that were captured when Egwene escaped
Mhm.
because she put the Adam on them, which should not work on them, which proved that they could channel. And she took those and smuggled them because she was trying to figure out what was going on with them, and kind of through her Sherlock Holmesy kind of thought process was like, oh my gosh, I think all Soldem can channel. And then she meets up with the girls, Elaine, Egwene, and Nynaeve in Tanchico, and they go on the adventure that proves it right. And it
And
was the big
the
scandal, yeah.
yeah, and the reason it made me think of this when we've been talking about these mental thought processes that we have, and especially when it comes to rigid mental thinking, is basically the first words out of her mouth when she meets them and realizes they can channel is, "You are not what I was taught," or "You are not what I was expecting,"
Mhm.
and that's big to one recognize it, two say it, and then three do something about it, which is the only payment I want for helping you because they got jumped, because Tanchico was a rough place and she jumped in and helped.
Mhm.
And she said the only payment I want is I just want to hang out with you and learn about you. And they become friends. And then of course when Nynaeve finds out she's Sanche, she gets pissed off because she's Nynaeve.
Mhm.
And I'm going to read from the prologue
Which is
of Memory
also
of
her
Light here, where
rigid
she's pissed
thinking.
off again.
Which is
Yeah,
also her rigid thinking because she got to like somebody and then found out something about her, just basically where she came from, just the place she
exactly.
came from,
Well,
and then automatically hated her for a while.
she finally blurts out at one point when they're having this back and forth, or maybe it's when she's talking to Elaine. Um, I meant to have it handy, but annoyingly, none of the bookstores around here have a copy of The Shadow Rising, and my son has my copy right now. So I've been slowly buying new editions as I give him mine and as I need them or want them to read for myself. So I was gonna get myself a new copy of Shadow Rising, and none of the bookstores around here have it. And stupidly, Barnes and Nobles won't like just ship it to the store I want. I can buy it and pick it up in store if it's in stock. I'm like, no, I'm fine waiting a day or two, but ship it to the one right next to me. I don't want to drive down to North Dallas because Dallas traffic is really freaking annoying.
And that's
But
why
I
Barnes and
digress.
Noble will eventually be another one that falls to Amazon. So,
Yeah, and I didn't want to give the money to Amazon, so I
oh,
refused
I've
on
I've
general
given up
principle.
that battle already. I have
I've I
too many purchases that I need to
Yep,
get
I already
Prime
give them
Day.
too
Yeah.
much. All right. Anyway, the point being that um she blurts out to someone. She finally says the quiet part in her head out loud, which Nynaeve is wont to do, which is that she's mad at she's so mad at Egeanin because she made me like her.
Which is externalizing. You
Exactly.
you made me that you made me mad. You made me this. You made me that. No, you got
Yeah.
mad. And it might have been an act that they did, but you still have autonomy here.
Yeah, and it's wait, she made you like her, or did you just like her because you were sitting around getting to know each other, and that was an element I wanted to bring
Well,
up as well. Is
no,
I
that's an
think
important point because if your Machiavellian types will
yeah.
make you, and in fact, it's a trait of narcissistic behavior that they actually will. Oh, we've talked about the difference between love bombing and just new relationships at one
Hmm.
point. A Machiavellian narcissistic type triad kind of character will do things to make you like them and study you the whole time so they know how to manipulate you later. But a normal person just does them and you end up liking them. And it's very, very, very difficult to distinguish between the two. You actually have to catch them in the act at some point. And that's a distinction that we need to
Yeah,
go with. And because we're in both of their heads at various points in time, we know it's not that behavior. But if we weren't in
exactly.
their heads, if I was just naive, I'm thinking double agent type stuff now, especially
Yes.
since I've lived in the tower and saw the manipulation. I've gone to the Stone of Tyr and saw the manipulation going on in those places. I've been in the village council and the women's circle back home, and there had to be that kind of stuff going on back and forth between those two.
Hmm.
You know, maybe not to the degree you would see in the tower with politics, but it's still internal politics, and people are trying to get the upper edge. You know, so she's probably on guard for that.
Yeah, and we know because we got a few points of view from her in the Shadow Rising that sh she's not being manipulative. Yes, she's keeping a secret, but it's because she knows that it would be really dangerous to let that secret out.
Well, I'll
Um,
give you a good example from
but
real
she is
life.
genuinely curious.
I'll give you a good example from real life that I've had to deal with in my personal life because we've been unapologetic about it. We've had Sunday school with Heath episodes. I am not a believer. You know, I guess you can call it agnostic or atheist or whatever. That to me is not a distinction either. But when I don't tell certain people that because I live in a very conservative area. I deal with clients and people judge you directly based on that.
Hmm.
And then when they find out, they're like, "Oh, but you're a good person." I'm like, "Yeah, maybe there's something else to it. Maybe there's some internal drives that happen, you know, altruism, you know, effective altruism, that kind of stuff." So when people find out about it, they automatically change their judgment of me and they act like I betrayed them. And it's like, no, it just wasn't relevant to what we were doing, the nature of our relationship, and it just came up this time. Okay.
Yeah, and the flip side that I've ranted about of when I briefly, I think this was right before Atheist Plus started, which, as you said,
Which
the
is
Atheist
funny
was,
adding a cross to the atheist. Yeah.
yep. But there were these people who I kept hearing about, and I was like, what, who are these atheist YouTubers? And this was when I was kind of first starting to get into YouTube as an entertainment and educational device, as opposed to watching TV or whatever. And I watched some of these and thought, there's no there there. These people purposely bring on the dumbest Christians to talk to and then declare victory.
Hmm.
And then you would actually see it on the rare occasions where people like this would run into someone who had really thought through why they believed what they believed, and they're like they're blown away and they don't know how to respond to, oh wait, you're actually intelligent. Yeah, just because I believe doesn't mean I'm, you know, a, a the faith is not blind faith.
Hmm.
You can come there through reason. In fact, you are required to in certain verses.
Well, that's actually a central tenet of the Jehovah's Witness practice. Their real big thing on faith is not blind.
Mm.
And that's a big difference between them and like your born again kind of jumbo churches and everything. They're like, no, this is not blind. We're not just blindly following. It's not just faith for the and we have great conversations because of that. Because they're trying to convince me through reason, and I appreciate those conversations.
Where this circles us back to the main topic is, um one of the reasons Egeanin is able to have the arc she does and change her mind is that she does, and this is a central part of her point of view in the in the prologue of A Memory of Light, and um, it's where she's sneaking into the camp and she's trying to find Nynaeve or Elaine, and she's going to give herself over to the White Tower. Um, why? This is what Bail Doman keeps asking her and drilling down and wanting to know. This is dangerous and it's not necessary. Why are you doing this? Um, that single word scratched at her like a splinter under a fingernail. Why? Why had she come all this way, traveling with Matrim Cawthon, putting herself dangerously near the daughter of the Nine Moons? My people live with a grave misconception of the world, Bale. In doing so, they create injustice. That's a big word from Ascension.
Hmm.
And, it was a point that RJ made, and there weren't any I looked and there weren't any times where he specifically mentioned Egeanin. So I was scrolling through looking at the interview and Q&A database on Theoryland for the Sanshin in general, and he made the point a couple of times that look, from their point of view, what they're doing is a rational, reasonable, needed reaction to the situation they found. Because both here in Randland and then over in Sanshin, when Luther Pandrag first landed, it was chaos. It was chaos. It was dog eat dog. It was, the weak profit off, or the mighty profit off of the weak.
It was Lord of the Flies.
Exactly. From their
Yeah.
point of the view, this is Lord of the Flies, and we need to impose order. And that's why the common people, so long as you don't get in their way, so the common people love the Sanshin because they have peace and stability.
Hmm.
And so for for a true believer who back to the blind faith isn't blind, this is why she's doing it because she's thinking these things through, but she's still a believer. And so for her to say we're committing injustice, that's a big effing deal because that's what they're all about.
Hmm.
That is the whole point of their orderly society is to create justice. I mean that was Arthur Hawkwing. The name of Arthur Hawkwing's sword was justice because that's what he was bringing to this chaotic world.
Hmm.
Um, they did reject you, Lewin, he said softly. You do no longer be one of them. I will always be one of them. My name was revoked, but not my blood. I do be sorry for the insult, doobie doobie doo. Um, I love that interplay that it we crapped on Sanderson quite a bit for his dialogue, um, which I felt was always very hit or miss because either it's like curt and like on the nose or it's meandering. And this is very like RJ like in its economy of words. Because that tells you a lot about these two people and what they've been through, that they both recognize that immediately and just mm, because of who you are and where you came from, that was a that was an insult, and I'm sorry.
Hmm.
And okay, that's enough. She understands that he didn't mean to insult her, but she's gratified that he recognized it and apologized. Now let's move on.
Hmm.
So just those couple of lines say a lot about these two people and what they've been through to get to this relationship. And so we hadn't thought to talk about them when we were talking relationships in the Wheel of Time, but they have a pretty interesting one.
Yeah, I don't like how it went in the long run, just because he became a simp by the end. But yeah, it was a good start to it. I liked. I mean, going all the way
Mm-hmm.
back to book two, and his, in his head, his respect for her, even though she was not doing the best thing for him, and it's
Yeah, yeah, and so she goes through, another page, half page here in her head, thinking that the the empire, the strength of the empire is the Domine, and the Domine are a lie, is what she says in one of
Mhm.
these back and forths. And again, that's a big deal. That is, like I said when I was talking about where I changed my mind on capital punishment last time is I didn't change my principles. I just changed the application of those principles. I
Hmm.
thought, you know what? No, this is a better way to apply those principles. And that's what she's doing here is no, I'm still loyal to the Empress, may she live forever, but we're all about justice and order, and the foundation of our power is a lie.
Hmm.
So I'm going to people to help them and thereby help my own people.
Hmm. Yeah, and you don't even have to pick a certain religion for this, but almost every major religion in the world has had some sort of empire involved with it. And as you could tell from our Sunday school talks, you can go back and watch them. The problem with the argument is there's no way to prove it and there's no way to disprove it. And but what if, like during the Holy Roman Empire, which was neither Holy Roman nor an empire, uh, to quote Steven Pinker, but it is, so say that you take that whole state, or even a state under Sharia law, and all of a sudden there was a way to prove that the basis for it, which would be Allah, is not true. If there was a way to prove it that just popped up, technologically or another religion in the world proved that it truly was real and you couldn't disprove it. There was just no way to say, oh my gosh, that proof that came forward is bunk. How many people, how much chaos would there be in that place that had that belief and their laws and their society and everything was based on that belief? So now we got the Shanshan who have this belief about women who can channel, or men too, because they just kill them, but people who can channel and the system they have to identify and do something about it, and that all falls on its head. And she's got to go through this, knowing that if it comes out, this is why she hides it for the most part, knowing that if it comes out, it will blow up a whole continent
Mhm.
in chaos.
The one of the interesting things that came to mind when I was reading this, and I don't know why this was in my head, but uh RJ was a good Southern gentleman. And as I was scrolling through, the Ilianer doobie doobie doo accent is supposed to be Dutch.
Hmm.
The Terrans are Spanish, duh. And the Sanshin are Southern. That's why they talk with a drawl and they talk slowly, which is hard for people on this side of the world to understand. And I I wonder if, purposely or maybe subconsciously, Egeanin is General James Longstreet.
Mm.
So, uh, for anyone who doesn't know, Longstreet was one of General Lee's two, major sub generals. The more famous one is Stonewall Jackson, um, and then the other one was James Longstreet. Uh, Longstreet wasn't really a true believer in the Southern cause, but that is where his life and his family was, and so he stood with them. Um, After the war, well, even before the war ended, he actually was in the same class at West Point as Grant. And I've heard that they roomed together, but I'm not sure if that's true. They did serve in the same unit in the Mexican War, so they knew each other. And it was Longstreet who told Lee, "No, Grant is a good man. He'll give you good terms," because Lee was concerned about the fate of his men. We need to surrender. It's over, you know. And so Longstreet was one of the voices that finally convinced Lee to surrender. And then after the war, he endorsed Grant when Grant ran for president, and he committed the gravest sin of all in the South as he became a Republican. And he did it urging people saying, "Look, the war's over. We need to move on, and we need to be the ones to rebuild our homes, not other people." And I that popped into my head when I was thinking about and reading through some of these passages with Egeanin is that's very much what she's doing here is look, we lost the war of ideas. Our idea is wrong and we need to fix it. And what she's saying to Bale is I'm still one of them. This is where I came from. This is who I am. I need to be the one to help fix this
Hmm.
so that we can regain not only can I regain my honor, but as a people we can regain our honor. Because as you said, this is an injustice and it's based on a lie. And that's a big deal. Um, I think you see a little bit of that too, this idea of um, and again, I wonder how much of this was conscious is look, you can be a good person supporting a bad cause.
Hmm.
And again, is definitely the biggest example of that. You see more of it when you see Tuan and when her and Matt start to interact, but you also see it with Perrin and I think it's General Ty Lee.
Hmm.
Was that her name?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
the
The
general
Shanshan general. Yeah.
that he partners with to um raid the Shido camp. And that is a good and decent and honorable person. And Perrin even says, next time we see each other, it'll unfortunately probably be on opposite sides of a battlefield, but you know, you're a good person. Here's my
Hmm.
hand, which is again a big deal to them because he's a freaking high lord basically, in their eyes anyway. So I think that was another example of look, yeah, what these people are doing is bad. It's wrong, but it's rational from their perspective. And you do see bad people in some of these, like some of these. Uh, there's the scene in at the end of Path of Daggers when the battle is chaotic and he keeps switching points of view and stuff. And there's the Sanchin noble who gets killed by the Death Watch guard because he's being an arrogant a-hole and he's about to lead them into disaster. So you do see that, well, they're not all good guys, and some of them
Hmm.
enjoy the power too much, but um, that doesn't mean they're all bad just because the system is bad.
Hmm. Yeah. You even see it. You brought up the Shido. You even see it amongst the wise ones in that circle.
Hmm.
How much pushback Savannah had to deal with when she was trying to get something done that she thought was because of her power hungry nature. She got so much pushback from them that was ultimately the undoing of them was the fact that they didn't just all go in lockstep
Hmm.
together. I mean, ultimately she got her way most of the time, but they pushed back enough that it slowed things down. It kind of put little wrenches in the plan. It allowed Perrin to do what he did because there was that little bit of no, that's not right.
Hmm.
That is not our way. That is not honorable. That is you.
And the importance of that is that that means you can have people, individuals like Egeanin, like General Ty who like Tawan, who you can break through that rigid mental thinking. And if you have individuals, well, then that means culturally you can break through cultural rigid mental thinking.
Hmm.
So you don't have to, you know, automatically think that you have to immediately get into conflict just because there is disagreement. Well, no, there's disagreement, and it may be pretty egregious because some of the stuff the song should do is pretty gross. In that scene, uh, when Egeanin, basically kneels and offers herself to Nynaeve is, I belong to the White Tower. I'll serve you however you want. One of the things Nynaeve snaps at her is, we don't keep people like animals like you, Sanchin.
Hmm.
So, you know, the Daco Vol and a lot of that is pretty egregious, but there are still good people, and they can be shown. You know what? Maybe,
Well,
maybe the people over here have a point.
let's compare them to the Terrans, right? Because they have that High Lord system, and yeah, it's not slaves, but the commoners are basically slaves. It is a high
Yeah, yeah.
authoritarian caste system where you can't touch a high lord without losing a hand, that kind of stuff. So no, they're not officially slaves, but there is a caste system to such a degree that these lords can do whatever they want to the common
Mhm.
folk. And in fact, that was one of Rand's biggest things in the beginning of the Shadow Rising was trying to change that.
That's what Matt, that's what the little noblemen that Matt is playing cards with are complaining about.
Hmm.
And it gets under Matt's skin. And
Hmm.
he gets mad that he gets mad because he's like, I want to win this pot. Don't stop pissing me off, dude. I want to win this pot.
Yeah. But yeah, that's why the High Lords of Tyr were never like fully behind Rand because he was trying to change that. Now, the Shanshan, yes, they officially do it, and even put leashes on some people, but it's no different. It just looks
Yeah.
different.
Well, along these lines, something I want to talk about in more detail next time on our social episode is you'd mentioned something that I thought was got noodling around in my brain about how you want to stop the pendulum swinging because
Hmm.
that's what we do culturally, societally, and I want to talk about different ways that we as individuals do that because I realized, as you say, sociology is just group psychology is well, before we can stop the pendulum swinging culturally in these culture war movements, we got to figure out how to not to do it within ourselves.
Hmm.
And so Egeanin, as an example, one of the reasons she jumps out is because it would be very easy to grab hold of that pendulum and pull it back and say, "No, I'm not moving." To dig in and double down. That is certainly a thing that people do. In
Hmm.
fact, you see it with Tawan when Matt first confronts her about well, you can learn to channel because you're a soldam. And she basically says, well, that doesn't matter because I don't. I
Hmm.
choose not to. Therefore, I'm better than those people. What? How does that, okay. But you can think of any number
Well,
of
th- there's
historical or
there's
current
a
examples of people doubling down.
there's a metaphor there though, because it's the old be capable of violence but not do it.
Hmm.
If there's actually virtue to that, if you are capable of this thing that your culture deems evil, and you choose not to do it and you're successful, there's actually a lot of virtue in that statement.
Which is how she's able to rationalize her righteous opinion.
Hmm.
Is yeah, she can absolutely rationalize that. Um,
Yeah, I
but
am I am capable of doing great harm to more people than not, to the point of they're no longer with us. But I've never done it in my entire life.
mhm. But the very fact that she's more open than other people, the very fact that yeah, she kind of has this rigid mental thinking, but she's not so rigid that she's like locked in a little box. That is how Satal is able to get through to her and talk to her. That's how Matt is able to get through, and that's how you see there's a shift here. It's not that she's changed her mind, but she seems less certain than she used to be.
Hmm.
Um, and
Well,
so
it's funny because we talk about cultures, and this is where the Shanshan have a blind spot. Like I said, they deem this thing evil, so they put the Adam on them. If it was truly just evil, you would still every person you found.
mm,
No, no, they need it for the power.
mhm.
They need that power for the power. So they made them slaves instead of just taking the ability away from them. And if you they talk about stilling and the after effects, the suicidal tendencies and all of those things. We don't know what happens if you still somebody before they've ever channeled because they don't know what they've lost.
I wonder if you can. I wonder if there's a connection there to cut off.
There
That would
has to
be a
be if it's
curious.
innate.
I need it. I should go down that rabbit hole and see if I can find if that was ever commented on.
Yeah, because
Um,
if it was truly
mhm.
evil, you would get rid of it, not use it.
Well, and there's the other side of the pendulum though as well, which is you're kind of touching on there, which is when you're confronted with something that breaks your schema, you can either grab hold of that pendulum and say, "No, I won't let it move," and double down, or you can shove it way to the other side and swing over with it,
Hmm.
which we have an example of in The Prophet.
Hmm.
Of he was someone who was very rigid, and then his worldview got shattered, and then he kind of lost his ever loving mind.
Hmm. Which is one of my few regrets about the show being canceled is I wanted to see how Massimo played out because the actor that was playing him was great.
Mm,
And I
yeah.
wanted to see where that went, but we don't get to.
Nope. Maybe one day, although it'll be completely different actors. But I that was one of the things that jumped out at me in this section is because from from her first interaction in Tanchico, it's interesting because you see an openness there of what's going on? This is interesting. I should learn more about this. And then here, as she's as her whole world has been upended, she's very sober minded and thoughtful
Hmm.
and acting. Now, part of this is her, strict hierarchical military, not just military, but naval, which is even more severe than army because not only do you have the normal soldiery kind of things to worry about, but oh yeah, nature's trying to kill you too.
Hmm.
So that's why they're very historically Navy discipline is much more rigid. And so there is definitely an element of that, of her very methodical way she's going through this. But it is a useful example of the sober-minded approach to, hmm, this thing that I thought doesn't appear to be true. Well, what do I do about it? And so she isn't letting the pendulum swing. She's holding it steady, going,
Hmm.
I need to think this through and I need to make the right move.
Yeah, the swinging the pendulum the opposite direction in her case would have been exposing the Soldem right away,
And
which
going
yeah.
on like since I used Civil War examples earlier, John Brown. Um,
Yeah.
John Brown in Bleeding Kansas hacked a bunch of people to death with swords. Now those people probably weren't great people, but that's pretty brutal and crazy and over the top. Is
Hmm.
he took that abolitionism to the extreme of violence. Not justifiable the justifiable warfare that came later, but vigilante violence. Um, oh heck, there's a on the other side. I'm glad this movie flopped because this was not something that should be celebrated. Nat Turner's Rebellion. This happened even before John Brown. This was one of the reasons the Southerners were so terrified of revolt, rebellion, and emancipation is in the 1840s, there was a guy by the name of Nat Turner who led basically a Spartacus-like rebellion, which you would think, okay, cool. Well, except that they went on a murderous rampage, killing, by some reports, they killed slaves that didn't join them.
Mm.
But then they killed every white person they found, to include hacking babies to death in their cribs.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, you
Was
could,
that
yeah.
Haiti?
No, there was a similar rebellion in
Okay.
Haiti,
Okay.
and there was a movie
I was about
about
to
that
say
as well.
Turner's doesn't sound like a Haitian name, but
No, no.
yeah.
Yeah, there was a movie about the Haitian Rebellion as well a few years ago, and it also flopped. And it was also horrifically brutal in that way.
Hmm.
And it's you understand, well, yeah, look at what's happened to these people, and now they're suddenly breaking free. Well, now they're acting as bad as the people that they're breaking away from.
Hmm.
It's like you're doing what you're rebelling against because you're letting that pendulum swing. You're letting that emotion carry you into extreme.
Yeah. Well, and I think hope the world probably learned from the Spartacus rebellion. Don't teach your slaves how to fight.
Conan, what is best in life? um, Anywho, the point being that we'll get into this in greater detail, I think, on both the psychological and the sociological, maybe the psychological level, because I want to talk about it on an individual level. But this is this is why we overthink these things, is because stories stick. And
Hmm.
then the more you read them and the more you think about them, the more you go, ah, okay, that makes sense because, well, then if that, well, then how about this? And you go down these rabbit holes and it kind of unlocks your mind and makes you think deeper, which
Hmm.
further solidifies the lessons that the story is trying to teach in the first place. And did I talk about this when we were recording? I think I talked about this with my brother. Um, I have been saying for a little while that I'm annoyed at the way some on the right are attacking Peterson and and what he has to say about stories. I did talk about that Wednesday, but reading Martha Beck's book has got me to thinking.
Hold that thought for a second. I got to pause this
Okay.
real quick. Sorry for the hiccup there. Everybody came in at once and I had to help unload stuff.
All right, so stories. This is why these things matter and why we kind of attack, or we've been attacking these mental health thoughts from both directions, and the streams have been crossing more and more. Is that in reading Martha Beck's book, I think that is why we like stories so much, and why, more importantly, for almost all of our human history, stories have been how we transmit ideas. It is how we teach. I mean, look at, we know just from oral traditions of various native tribes that you have, you know, cosmology and uh morality tales and fables and whatnot that go way back. But you look at the things we have written down that are really freaking old, you know, like the Iliad and the Odyssey. You know, these were to epic poems that were related orally to a group to teach them, not just entertain, but to teach. And the reason I think those stories are so important and the reason they resonate so much is because that is the left and the right hemisphere working together the way they're supposed to, balancing each other. You know, the one side processing and making the lists and thinking about things, but then the right side having to creatively engage in this fiction. So it is, you are, in a sense, when you are reading or listening to a story, you are daydreaming to various degrees based on how your brain works. You're visualizing when you know, even just reading a comic strip. You, one of the reasons, I just brain farted on his name. The guy who created Calvin and Hobbes is, he was insistent there would never ever be a Calvin and Hobbes cartoon
Hmm.
because everyone who reads that comic strip hears a different voice in their head.
Hmm.
So there is no way to ever make it Calvin and Hobbes for everyone. It's just
Hmm.
impossible.
Well, I was going to bring this up earlier when you talked about the conciseness of the conversation. Exformation is important.
Mm,
So you have information, which is the actual data from the environment that you actually perceive. That's the information. The exformation is everything else. And that's the context of everything. So your analysis of the information you take in is based on your schema of that controls your view of the exformation. So you said there was all these feelings behind those things with little words. That's the exformation.
mm,
And so the exformation is your voice in your head, the Calvin and Hobbes. It's the moral behind the story. It's the all of those other things. And exformation is as important as information. And in fact, if you're just looking for information, this is why I love what information theory is doing in the discoveries they're making, but I hate that they try to treat us like computers because computers are all about information. Computers cannot contextualize exformation. We can. And sometimes we call it anxiety. Sometimes we call it foresight. It depends on if you end up with a healthy version of it, right? So exformation is so important in every interaction we do. And that's basically what your right brain is doing, is contextualizing these, and your left brain is making a scheme out of it so you can be more efficient. Now, as we age, and this is a very important thing, we try to be more efficient in our brain. So, people are like, oh, older people are rigid. Well, they're not necessarily rigid. They're conserving energy to some degree because their brain has been oxidized for more years than years. Okay. They've had more inflammatory damage. They've had all of these things. And actually, your brain functioning starts to move forward as you get older. So things that normally would have been back here are actually being handled by the prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex is what we've learned through our entire life, basically. And unfortunately for us, the prefrontal cortex is the first thing to deteriorate with age too. And uh, the aging psychs would be like, oh, we don't know how that's happened, why that's happening, the neuropsychs. But the evolutionary psychs say, well, it's because it's the newest part. It's not as robust because it's the last one that has developed over the 100,000 years of human development. So yeah, you actually you're if you were to do a brain scan at 20 and do a task and do a brain scan at 80 and do the same task, it would be firing up here at 20 and it would be firing up here at 80. So we need those schemas to conserve energy. The problem is, are we getting positive schemas or negative schemas or I'll say adaptive or maladaptive schemas. Are
Mhm.
they helping us or are they hurting us?
Which again, the back to why stories matter is my last thought. Why we're going to continue to
Story
use
is a scheme.
stories. It's it is a scheme, but it's not a list.
Hmm.
So it's not like, go to ChatGPT or Gemini and say, hey, summarize a memory of light for me. Okay. And it's going to give you a bunch of bullet points, basically. That is not the same thing as the story. Okay, yeah,
Hmm.
you have all the information, but you haven't experienced the story.
I mean, you see it for some things that people have to read in school,
Hmm.
but for the most part, you don't see cliff notes for fiction, right? You see it for Dummy's Guide to Gardening or something, Dummy's Guide
Yeah.
to this thing that has step-by-step processes. But other than, again, I'm gonna put that caveat in there because someone will come in with the example. But other than like the book you have to read for 10th grade English or whatever, and
That
almost every
everybody
school
has
does,
to read.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're not gonna get that. You're not gonna get the cliff notes of Wheel of Time because it's you wouldn't get anything from it. The only thing you'd get from it is if you had a teacher telling you to take a test on this. You wouldn't get the adventure. You wouldn't get the morals. You wouldn't get uh, the underpinning thrill that you get from reading a book.
And also, it's back to my kind of hypothesis on what Martha Beck is talking about. It wouldn't stick with you. I think the reason we internalize moral lessons and life lessons from stories is because we have both hemispheres working together, and that makes the effect stronger.
Hmm.
It imprints it in your mind better in much the same way that if you're studying, it helps to have multiple sensory inputs. So
Hmm.
usually when I'm taking notes, if I'm making myself some vocabulary flashcards, I almost never actually use the flashcards. I might glance through them once at a time. The act of making them, of reading it and writing it and talking out loud so I'm hearing it,
Well, but also
imprints it.
there's another aspect to this. This is from cognitive psych, is the fact that if your notes are in your own words, the fact that you've processed it and
Mhm.
consolidated the knowledge into your own words is actually a big part of that for consolidating your memory.
Well, we will dive into all of this kind of more next time because I think all of this is important to how you individually don't let yourself get jerked back and forth by a swinging pendulum. And these, no, I'm the one in control here. Let me think through
Hmm.
this and not overreact or underreact, but think through and react. And I think all of these are kind of important information and useful techniques when it comes to that.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go ahead and do some more homework, even though it's something I study a lot anyways, on the fact that this is a place we can take Eastern philosophy and science and put them together a lot because that jerk back and forth is a very Western idea because we are
Mm.
about control, whereas a lot of Eastern philosophies, which is weird that China is so authoritarian because right, it goes against everything that they've done for the last 3,000 years, right?
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
that's why the CCP tries so desperately to control history in the Orwellian style. It's basically
Mhm.
say, no, no, we are the natural successors of all this, and China has always been like this.
Yeah. Well, they have the old school philosophy that would go against that, but they also are very communitarian by
Hmm.
nature. By I'm
Hmm.
I'm saying by nature genetically they are communitarian, and that's because the rice farmers stayed, and things like rice farming is a very communal effort. So it's Yeah, so bring into the Eastern philosophy on that when be like water, my friend, right? That kind of thing. But the old Tai Chi, or we've done sticky hands training. In fact, McGill Institute Back Institute uses sticky hand training for back rehab because it's all about learning when to push and pull and fight and not fight and give and take. And what we do see in older individuals is with balance, there's more sway. So they get out of their center of gravity more than younger people. And realistically, we're still trying to figure out why. Is it the musculature? Is it the inner ear? Is it any of that? But just the fact that they get out of their center more often is one reason why they're more prone to injury. It's not just the tissue breakdown. It's not just it's the fact that they just aren't centered. We lose our ability to center for some reason. And so sticky hands training is a good way to learn your center, your base, because if you don't have it, you fall.
All right, well, we will dive into that Wednesday, so we will see y'all then.
All right, later, guys.